Welcome, everyone. My name is Irina Kamalova. I'm a director of Women Who Connect London Network. And today we have an amazing session. It's Acing, your next tech interview with our amazing partner, SThree UK. And our speaker today, Sonam Garrigan. She's going to lead you through the way how actually to get your interview, how to be prepared, a lot of tips. And I think this topic is very hot right now in this not really calm time. So yeah, I hope that you will get a lot of insights from today's session, and I hope that you will enjoy it a lot. So thank you, and thank you for joining us. And I give my imaginary microphone to Sonam.
Thank you, Irina. Hi, everybody. Nice to virtually meet everyone. I'm just going to share my screen and then we can get started. I'm Sonam Garrigan, Associate Business Manager for Real Staffing, one of SThree's UK specialist STEM recruitment brands. I've been with our company now for 11 years. One of the reasons, I guess, that I joined recruitment and I've stayed in recruitment is I love to help people. I love to help people in their careers achieve their personal and professional aspirations. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to talk today and hopefully be able to help some of you with some tips and things that I've learned over the years that I believe can kind of help you have a successful interview. I just wanted to, I guess, share a couple of pictures of me and recently had a baby. So I've come back and actually settling back into the world of recruitment. And so one of my purpose, I guess, is for my family and I to live a happy, healthy life full of laughter. And something I'm really kind of big on is my values, and really important that these values are, you know, within my team as well as wider SThree, you know, that they're the things that people tend to kind of stick to as well. So being honest and authentic, so being honest with yourself and others and being your most authentic self, showing compassion and kindness and showing that to yourself and others around you, and growth and knowledge. To be able to grow, you need knowledge. Knowledge is power, and I really hope that I can give some people that today. Fingers crossed. So just a little bit about SThree. SThree, our purpose is around bringing skilled people together to build the future. That's people like yourselves on this call. You know, I believe everybody on this call is technically skilled, and you will in some way, shape or form help build that future. And that's what SThree's purpose is. And our vision is to be the #1 STEM talent provider in the best STEM markets, at the centre of 2 long-term secular trends around STEM and flexible working. SThree's actually got 9 niche brands, 34 years of experience and 43 offices in 15 different countries, as well as 2,716 employees worldwide. So hopefully that should give you kind of the assurance that actually I know what I'm talking about. I'm able to give you some advice that can really help you for your next interviews. Just a bit of an agenda. So I just want to go through a couple of things that we'll be talking through. So a bit of an overview. Bit of an overview, interview etiquette, interview hints and tips, advice for technical roles, questions to ask your recruiter, and benefits of a mock interview. There will be a section at the end for a Q&A. So please do put any of your questions that you have throughout this session in the Q&A box, and we will answer as many as we possibly can towards the end as well. So you've got an interview, you secured it, you know, that's incredible, well done. But what do you actually do next? And sometimes that can be the daunting part. You think, right, I've done it, now what? This is a real opportunity for you to sell yourself. It's an opportunity for you to show that you're the right person for the job. But not only that, it's an opportunity for you to see, is this the right job for you? I really think that's an important thing, is for you to take that time to, it might look good on paper, but you need to see, is the culture right for you? Is the organisation right for you? Are their values aligned to what yours are? And is the actual job, is it going to develop you? Are you going to be able to progress in that role? And in the current climate as well, you might be asked to do an interview remotely. I think I've done several over the last couple of last 2 to 3 years now that have all been via Teams. We're lucky enough to be able to do things in that way now, but they might be by video, they might be by phone. And we have to remember that regardless of whether an interview is a virtual interview or a telephone interview, that doesn't change how important that interview is for you. So you still need to act the same way that you would if this interview was in person. I think that's really important to note. Some interview etiquette, the do's and the don'ts. So we'll go on to the don'ts in a minute. But I think it's really important to dress professionally, regardless of whether you're on Teams, even a phone call. Sometimes the way you dress can really change the way that you can kind of come across on the phone. And I'm a very big believer of sort of mindset, and the way you dress is how you feel. And I think that's really important for an interview, and it's great to show a level of professionalism. I've had all sorts, I've had people turn up into an interview in a full suit, but also the other end of the spectrum, where people might have came in really casual. And actually, you already create a bit of an impression, because you want somebody to impress you as when you're doing the interview. So it's really important you do that. Put your phone on silent. I think the amount of interviews I've done where people's phones have started ringing, or they've got a text midway through, not only is it distracting for you yourself, but it's distracting for the person that's interviewing you, and your kind of trail of thought might get lost. So really make sure that you kind of check that and think, okay, let me make sure that I've done that. Arrive 10 minutes early. I'm a huge believer of arriving early. I'd always prefer to arrive 30 minutes early than 1 minute late. It gives you time to compose yourself as well. If you arrive sort of last minute or late, you'll feel rushed, and then actually you won't be as calm throughout your interview, and maybe the prep that you've done, you might forget things because you're flustered. So try and arrive early so that you can give yourself that time to just take a breath and, just reflect on the preparation that you've done. So you can really clearly articulate what you're trying to say and sell yourself, really. So it gives you an opportunity to do that. Plan your journey as well. Again, super important. We all know that traffic can be ridiculous. Trains cannot be on time. Trams cannot be on time. Whatever your mode of transport is, sometimes things go wrong, and we know that. So as well as arriving early, give yourself enough time. I think that's such an important thing. So you don't want to be kind of running late for something just because maybe, I don't know, you've got stuck in a traffic jam. These things do happen, though. They're very common, and they do happen. So if they do, don't stress too much, but try to, where you can, plan your journey ahead. And if virtual, consider your background. There's so many different options on, say, if you were doing it via Teams, there's options for you to select different backgrounds, blur your background, or just think about where you're sitting, and don't have things like maybe the TV on in the background, or a radio or something. Or if there are other people in your house and you can't help that, maybe try and find a quiet spot that you can actually do that interview. Bring some notes with yourself as well, write them down, sit them next to you. Just make sure you've got a couple of different things. Don't try and write lengthy notes. I always find maybe just write some keywords that will prompt you to think of something. So make sure you have those notes, and you'll do that in your preparation part, which we'll come on to a little bit later. And give feedback in the interview and ask questions. Sometimes when I'm doing interviews for my team or my department, and people don't ask questions, and that's fine. You might have had all your questions answered, but I always like the people that bring in a bit of a different sort of question, and that might be around, my experience and what challenges do I foresee in this role and things like that. But I just think it's important to ask those questions. It shows that you're interested, and it shows, by giving feedback, it shows that you've listened. I'd also recommend as well, If anybody has any other interview etiquette do's that or don'ts that they've come across in their experience over, with their interviewing experience, please share that in the chat. So I think everybody could learn from each other. So if you do have anything that maybe I haven't kind of touched on, please do put that in the chat for the group to read also. And now we've got the don'ts. I touched on it before around arriving early. Don't arrive late. It shows poor planning. So it's really important, again, you take that time to plan your journey, get there a little bit early, compose yourself. As I said, arriving late leaves you flustered. Don't check your phone as well. Just have it away from the minute you enter that reception, or the minute you're kind of planning to go on Teams. Just have it away. Just don't have it near you. It's the best thing, because otherwise it can be a distraction. This is a really big one. Don't speak poorly of a current or past employer. I've been on a number of interviews where candidates have spoken in a negative way about a past employer. And look, things happen, experiences happen. We've all had them. We've all had negative experiences in roles. However, if you're speaking about that poorly, it gives the other person a bit of a, oh, okay, what actually happened? And then you ask yourself tons of questions about what actually happened in that interview or in that role. So I would always say, just try and avoid any negative conversations and keep everything light and positive where you're able to. Don't ask about salaries unless prompted, and I'll come on to this a little bit later, but normally if you're working via or if you've got secured the interview via a recruitment company or say HR, I would always discuss the salary with that person, with the middle person around recruitment or HR. I wouldn't do that in the interview. In the interview, I'd really focus just on understanding the role, selling yourself, and getting to know the organisation. They're the key things. The salary should either be discussed beforehand with your recruiter or afterwards, but never in the interview. Don't read notes word for word as well. You can sound quite robotic, and it's easy to do. And if you've really prepped really hard and wrote lots of notes and you want to get all your points across, I understand that sometimes it's easier to read word for word, but maybe, as I've said earlier, give yourself little words to prompt you to say what you want to say. So you sound less robotic and more of yourself comes across in the interview, which is really important. Posture is important as well. So don't slouch or yawn, or it gives the impression that, oh, you're not really interested in this interview, or actually you're quite casual about it, where really you want to be smart and sitting up and quite engaged. Being slouching and yawning maybe doesn't give off that impression. And be truthful and don't embellish your experience. One of my values at the very beginning was about honesty and transparency. I think it's, be honest, be transparent where it's appropriate, in terms of don't obviously be negative about an employer, but be honest and transparent about your experience. And that's really the most important thing, is you and your experience. So share that with the interviewer. How to prepare. I think this is something that sometimes we can always get a bit, well, what do you prepare? What's too much? What's too little? I kind of looked at this and thought, what would I do if it was me in this, if I was interviewing again now, what things would I look at? So I'd actually research the company and research the people who were interviewing me. And I wouldn't go any deeper than that. I wouldn't start looking at all their employees, etc. But these are just some of the things that I feel would really help you, and I'll tell you why. The About Us section on their website, it's a really short overview of what that company's about. And at this point, you don't need to know much more. You just need to know that short blurb to understand, okay, what are they about? Can I get a general feel from their mission statement or their purpose, their vision? You can kind of get a bit about a company from that, and really see, does that align to what you're about? Does that align to what you want to do in a future organization that you're going to work for? And if it does, continue with obviously the prep. Then start to look at their purpose, their values, their principle, and their culture. I believe understanding a company's values is really important, because again, you need to see, do those values align to your values, and their principles and their culture align to a place that you want to work? I shared my values at the beginning of this because I think it's really important that everybody understands what each other's values are. So it's important to know that about a company you're going to work for. The news section of their website, is there anything exciting coming up? Any projects that they're kind of looking at? Any new pieces of work that they're getting involved in, or new companies they're partnering with? Again, this kind of helps you to look at that and think, that's really interesting for me. This is something I want to do. But this also gives you a lot of kind of tools to then, when you're in that conversation or in that interview, you can actually share some of this and be like, oh, actually, I was reading the news section on your website and I saw that you are currently taking part in X, Y, and Z. That's really interesting to me. Could you tell me a little bit more about that? And all of a sudden, that person that's interviewing you perks up because they think you've taken the time to read and you've taken the time to learn about what we're doing and you're genuinely interested. So as well as selling yourself and your skill set, you're showing them that you care about their business and you care about this interview. So I think that's a really important part. Their social media, have a look to see what their social media presence is like. What are they posting? A lot of companies might post things that they're actively doing. They might post things about different initiatives that you're interested in. And again, same thing I said just before, link that back to when you're in your interview and share that if it's something that is obviously interesting to you. Consider how you relate to their culture, values, and purpose. I was a recruitment consultant. I started off as a recruitment consultant in my career. And one of the things we teach our consultants is understand what that client is looking for and sell back to their needs. So if you can understand what a company's purpose and values are and their culture is like, see how you relate to it. And when you're talking, you can say, actually, I saw that one of your values was around being kind and compassionate. Actually, can I give you an example of actually where I think that really fits with me? And if you do that, again, you're selling yourself and you're selling yourself back to the company. And that's a really powerful thing to do in an interview. Think about why you want to work there in particular and why that company over others. There'll be so many different companies out there or different competitors of that organization. And you can then use that and sell that and say, actually, I want to work for your company because your values, your culture, your purpose, the things you're trying to achieve, your 3 to 5 year plan aligns with me and everything that I want to do over X company over there, which may be a competitor. They like that. They like to know that actually you choose them over another company, and that makes them feel good. So actually they'd be more bought into you. So I think that's really important in terms of researching the company. The other thing as well is research the interviewers. This is really important. I have a number of interviews, as I said earlier, and people always look at my LinkedIn the day before. And I like that because I know they're prepping. It shows me that they're prepping, and they're getting to know me a little bit. My sister asked me the other day, actually, she was going for an interview and she said, I said, have you looked at the person's LinkedIn? She went, I don't want to do that. They'll see that I viewed it. And I was like, what's wrong with that? And she said, I don't want them to think, I'm just like stalking their LinkedIn. And I was like, I don't think that anyone would think that. They would just think that you're taking the time to see what they do and kind of understand, is there anything you can learn about them before your interview. It helps you be informed about what they do. You might have a name and that's it. You want to know their job title. You want to know what they do. You want to know how long have they been at that company for. Have they progressed through, so that you can ask them these questions. You can learn about their experience. Identify any experiences or interests you might have in common. So a lot of people tend to put things on their LinkedIn that they're interested in. Use that for warm engagement during the interview. There's nothing wrong with saying, I looked at your LinkedIn. I saw that you're really interested in yoga. I love doing that too. How long have you been doing it for? Again, it creates warm engagement. It kind of allows the interviewer to know that you've taken the time to research them. And I think that's such another powerful thing that you can do. And it shows that you really want this job and you really want to do well in the interview. So that's just some of my tips around how to prepare. Know the job as well. I think this is something I've seen over the years. I've seen a lot of candidates who have interviewed for me, candidates that have interviewed for my customers, they don't spend the time learning the job or understanding what the job specification is and the person specification is, or using it to their advantage. You know, if you read a full specification and you took the time to highlight and go through different things that were relevant to you, you could use that and sell that back when you're talking to the client. You could say, you know, oh, I've actually done X, Y, and Z, and I saw that's one of the key responsibilities. I did this in this role. This is what I achieved from it. So you can quite clearly sell back to their job specification and a job advert. But if you don't take the time to read it, you can get caught short, and actually you can sell yourself short because you might have done so much on the job specification already. If you don't read it and you can't sell to it, then you're doing yourself a disservice. So I think it's really important to do that. Write notes and add comments on that. You know, print the JD off if you can. Write notes and comments and give examples of how you've delivered these tasks or how you've shown the skills in the past. And I'll go on to the next slide in a moment, where it's just a bit of a overview of how you would do that, and actually something that can clearly articulate your message. Think about any gaps where you don't have experience. You know, this is another thing actually my sister said to me the other day. This interview she was going for, she was like, I'm not qualified for it. And I was like, why would you apply for a job that you're 100% qualified for? How do you learn? How do you grow? How do you develop? You need to be, of course, you know, 80% qualified, but that 20% you can learn, and you should learn. You know, that's how you grow, don't you? And become, you know, change your direction of your career. And it's how I've grown in my past 11 years. I didn't know how to be a business manager when I started. Now I do, because I've really worked on those gaps. So think about those gaps and think, okay, and highlight them as well. Say, look, you know, I can see I've got experience in X, Y, and Z, but I don't in this. However, what I'd like to do is learn. And, you know, I'd be really interested in, are there any ways that you would develop me in that, or actually would you want me to go away and do that myself? So really kind of highlight that. Consider similar skills that might be transferable, or think of what you can do to quickly upskill yourself in this area. As I've said, you know, you might be able to think, okay, say for example it's a technology that you've never used before. You might be able to say to that client, right, you know, I haven't used this piece of tech. I've used this, it's got similarities. However, this is how I learned this one, and this is what I'll go away and do to understand this, or this is how I would set myself up to succeed to ensure that I become knowledgeable with this technology and I gain experience. So doing things like that will then give that customer assurance and think, do you know what, actually, I believe that they will go and do that because they've done it before. So that's really important too. Knowing your blind spot is important as well. There might be a question related to it, and you know, the last thing you want to do is get really caught off guard and be like, oh, I don't know. Whereas if you already know that you have some gaps in this in terms of the job specification, you can preempt that by actually saying, I don't have gaps, but this is what I would do to kind of upskill myself. So again, just a couple of points on knowing the job and how important it is. Don't skip past the job description. Don't just go off what your recruiter says, or you know, a blurb that you read. You need to take your career into your own hands. So read it and know it before you go into that interview. In terms of how to prepare sort of answers and questions as well, I just want to say that on this slide, there wasn't any way I couldn't get all the questions on there. So I just wanted to give a couple of example ones, but I'd be more than happy to share, I guess, a list of questions that I'm frequently asked in interviews, or that I recommend, or my team recommends that they ask when they're going for interviews. And I can share that with you as almost like a bit of a cheat sheet of things that you can ask when you get interviews moving forward. So I can definitely do that with the group after this session. But you need to prepare answers to frequently asked questions. A lot of questions get asked in multiple interviews, so it makes sense to actually have some pre-prepared answers, or just have a think about it. Think, actually, okay, if they ask me this question, I've kind of got a rough answer for it, or I know, you know, the route I would go down. So some of the things the generic ones that they would ask you are, why do you want to work for our company? What are your strengths and weaknesses? And can you tell me about a time that you've overcome a challenge? These are really important. You know, the strengths and weaknesses, you can link that back to, well, actually a strength of mine is, you know, I would go out there and really upskill myself on every piece of technology or every kind of bit that you need me to within the deadlines that you need me to, and I'm quite kind of capable of doing that. But you can share these strengths and use them to sell back to the client or back to the person that's interviewing you. And why do you want to work for our company? You know, think about what we talked about a couple of slides ago, where I said actually understanding their values, their purpose, their vision, link that back. And, you know, so actually I want to work for your company because you're trying to achieve X, Y, and Z by 2024. And that's something I want to be a part of because X, Y, and Z reason. You know, share that with them. And you don't always have to give a generic answer as well. You know, it could be personal. It could be something that, just think about, if I think about SThree and bringing skilled people together to build the future, for me, that's personal. The brands that we work within, the sectors that we work in, we genuinely help people. And for me, that's why I want to work there, because it helps people achieve their goals, but it also, the sectors we work in, help people receive better healthcare, for instance, or you know, different things. So I think it's really important that you do share that with them. And telling them of a time that you've overcome a challenge. Most people shy away from this one, but I think it's a brilliant one to share because it shows what you're capable of doing. It shows that you don't shy away from something. And actually, if you've got a challenge, you will think about a solution. I'm a very solutions-driven person. And I think that if you've got a solutions-driven mindset, then you will achieve most of the goals that you set out to. So I think that's really important. Don't shy away from that question and make sure you do that prep for it and think about challenges beforehand. Some additional points: ensure any pre-interview tasks expected by the interviewer are completed. Some might want you to fill out some forms. They might want you to have a think about a few things. They might want you to create a 5-minute presentation. We had a customer the other day that wanted our candidates to show examples of dashboards that they'd created using Power BI. So I think these different types of things are really important, but take the time to prep and do them, because if you don't and another person does that interviews, even if you have all the right skills on paper, that person that's done the preparation will be considered for the role over yourself. So it's really important that you do that. Identify 1 or 2 questions to ask the interviewer at the end of the interview. Again, super important. These questions can be about the job, you know, they can be about the company, or they can be about the person, you know, or you can say things like, what do you foresee the biggest challenge would be for me if I was to join this role? Or actually, you know, what's been the biggest challenge for you? What have you faced? So what's been your biggest success or biggest achievement? Or what are your personal core values? Just asking them a few things like that, again, shows that you're really bought into them and really bought into the company. Practice as well. Do mock interviews with friends or family members. I get a lot of my family members wanting to do mock interviews with me, and I'll always take the time to do it because I think it's really important to practice, because especially if you've not, for me, I haven't done an interview myself for 11 years. And, you know, even though this is my profession, you'd still feel a bit, oh, okay, what do I do in that interview? What do I talk about? So practice, you know, the more you practice, the better that you become at it. And remember, it's practice doesn't make perfect, it's progression. You know, the more you practice, the more you progress and the better you become at something. So that's a really important point. And then thinking about when you answer questions and what I said at what I was talking about earlier about how you would answer certain things, this is something that we find really useful, and what kind of how you should look at answering that. So it's the STAR technique. So think about the situation that you were in, think about the task that you were responsible for, what action did you take, and then what was the result, what happened at the end of it. And even if you wanted to prep beforehand and prep some brief points underneath, you had a situation. So what was your biggest challenge, for instance? And then you use the STAR technique for your biggest challenge. All of a sudden, you've got a really comprehensive answer that you can then share in that interview. So if you try and use that format and that technique in your interview, when asked questions about, can you give me an example of a time where you did X, or can you give me an example of a time where something went wrong? If you use this technique, it will really help you just be able to clearly articulate things and get your message across. Sometimes, I'm guilty of it myself. I get a bit flustered, and sometimes I can really want to say something and maybe it doesn't come out the right way because I haven't taken the time to prep or plan, and I've become a bit flustered with my words. Whereas if I stop, take a breath and think, right, apply the STAR technique to this in terms of what I want to say, 9 times out of 10 it comes out the way I want it to. The next bit is around interview hints and tips. So be positive and enthusiastic. It's so important to smile and show that energy in an interview. Just make sure you're very positive about the interview, the job, the role, the skills that you could learn, everything they're asking you. Be positive, and doing it with a smile is always genuinely nice, and you automatically make the other person feel comfortable. Have a notebook, pen, paper, glass of water to hand, just the things that you would need to make sure that you've got them just in case. And a notebook and pen, I think you should take notes in an interview. I think it's really important, if they're talking and you just make some notes of things, you can again sell back to that. Hopefully you've done enough prep for it, but they might say something different in the interview that you've not found in any of your research. Write it down and actually use that and sell back to it if you feel it's relevant. Being nervous is so normal. Relax and take your time. I was nervous today. I think speaking to anyone and doing interviews, etc., you can feel nervous, you can feel anxious, but really take a time to take a bit of a breath and think, okay, you know you're good at what you do, you've got the technical ability, you've been selected for an interview for a reason. Believe in yourself, and take that time to answer questions. Don't be afraid to ask an interviewer to repeat the question as well. I think sometimes that's fine. You might not have heard it, or actually nerves might have got the better of you, or you might be thinking about something to say, and you might have missed the full question. So just ask them to repeat it. It's not a problem for the interviewer. They'll absolutely do that. So please do ask that. And use comments like that's an interesting question. So delay tactics, it's an interesting question, or let me think about that for a moment so I can provide the best example, or take a sip of water. If you really need a moment to think, there's nothing wrong, and don't be afraid of saying, I've got quite a few examples and I want to provide the best one that's relevant for this. So can I just have a second to think about that? That's fine. That's okay to do, because you've probably got a number of examples that you can draw on, and that's factual, isn't it? You probably think, actually, I want to talk about something that is really relevant to this role, and you might have to take a second to think about that. Not all of us can remember things off the top of our head and are able to say it off the top of our head, so that's fine to do that. And most importantly, a really big one for me is let your personality shine through. Smile and make eye contact. I'm a huge believer, and the recruitment industry is a little bit different, but if somebody is positive, they're smiling, they're making eye contact with me, they're showing me they're ambitious, and they're showing me that they want to do something and they've got the will, I will teach them the skill if I'm able to. But that personality and that energy and bringing that to a job, for me, that's imperative, and it's so important to someone's success. So I think that's a really important part to note. Just some advice on technical roles as well. Technical roles are a little bit different to the other ones, and I think it's really important that you do some of these things. So understand the company's 3 to 5 year plan or strategic objectives or digital transformation objectives. That helps you, again, understand where you can add value. If you can read that and think, I've done that before somewhere, or I've worked on X, Y, and Z before somewhere, you can add real value because you know that about them. If you don't learn that, if you don't take the time to understand that, I think it will really hinder you in your interview, because you might know something amazing or have worked on something amazing that would really help them. So I think that's important to do. Research the tech that the company uses as well. go in there and say, you know, if you've used it, you can say, I can see that you use X, Y, and Z. This is what I've done with it. This is where I've used it. Really sell yourself if you know what technology they use. You know, I'll be the first to admit, you know, I am not technically skilled, but I do work with sector specialists. I do work with a lot of candidates who have amazing technical ability, and they talk to me about the technology that they use. But sometimes I don't understand it all because I'm not within that sector. And my husband's actually, he's data migration specialist, and he told me that whenever you're in doubt, watch some YouTube clips if you're not familiar. So YouTube and Google the technology, and it often comes up with short clips that can kind of talk you through what it is or how you would use it. And I've used that tip ever since because he's really helped me, and it really helps me kind of understand things if I'm not too sure. And you know, that might not apply for people on this group, but I think if you are unfamiliar with stuff, the world of the internet is great to help you, and YouTube's brilliant for that, and I've had first-hand experience of it. Talk about the ways in which you keep yourself up to date with new technology as well. This is another thing. So I had a number of interviews for a customer who had asked me, how do candidates upskill themselves on different technology? What do they do? And I went away and researched this and spoke to my talent pool and found out that actually lots of people do additional courses. They'll do things on the weekends. They might do things out of hours to kind of upskill themselves, because as we know, tech's innovative. There's always new things that are coming out, new things for people to learn. And that's really important. A company wants to know that. A company wants to know, what are you doing to upskill yourself? Because if you upskill yourself, you can then bring some of that innovative new ideas to us as a company, and they're really interested in that. So it's important that if you're interested in it, share the ways in which you do that. And again, if technology excites you, if new technology excites you, then let them know. I've had so many clients that have said, oh, this person just only wants to use SQL or stay in like one specific kind of space in technology. They want to know that you're excited about it and you're going to go on that transformation journey with them. And if you're not showing that energy around it, sometimes they're like, do you know, it's not for me. I want somebody that's going to come on that 3 to 5 year plan with us. And that means evolving and kind of adapting to new technology. So show them you're excited about it, and then give real-time examples of where you've used it as well. I think that's really important. You know, if you've used the technology that they use in a certain place, maybe use a STAR technique and talk them through that. Let them see that you know what you're talking about as well. That's another thing, is giving people that assurance that you really do know what you're talking about. I think that's an important thing to look at as well. The other thing I would say as well is questions to ask your recruiter. I've had lots of candidates ask me loads of questions, candidates ask me no questions. But I think a great recruiter should tell you all of this anyway, as a given when they're prepping you in the interview. But if they don't, this is some of the things that you should be asking them. How many stages is the interview process? Often we find that stages, there can be 1 stage, there can be 2 stages, there can be 3. You want to know that, because if you don't and you do the first stage and you think that's it, you could get your hopes up and thinking, oh, I'm going to get an answer now. Where actually there might be a couple of more stages in the process. So ask them what that stage is and what does it involve. You know, how many people are going to be on the panel, who will be interviewing me. If it moves to the next stages, who's involved then? And actually, what if there's next stages, what's the timeline look like? Every recruiter will know the timeline. They will know from start to finish when your interview is to when they will make an offer to when they will start. So make sure you ask them that, because they will know. And if they don't know, make them go back to the client. You know, they should be working on your behalf as well as working on behalf of the customer. So make them go back and find that information for you, because you need to know so that you're prepped as well. Always ask if there's a presentation or a technical test involved as well. There's been a few people caught short over the years that didn't know that there was a technical test or a presentation, turned up at the interview and actually, they've asked to do a technical test, and they've done it and you can do it, but you get thrown off because you're not prepared for it. You don't know that that's going to happen. So ask them that question, and also ask them, well, that if there is a technical test, is that going to be in their office environment? We had one for a customer where he put them in the middle of their office environment, in the middle of their team, and said, right, do the test. And that's nerve-wracking for some people to do that with 30 people that you don't know in the middle of the room. And it is nerve-wracking, but I think ask them that question to be prepared, and ask them what environment it's going to be in, because you need to know that so that you can prepare yourself. Ask them what the culture's like. I go and often meet our customers. We'll go and meet our customers on site, as does majority of people in SThree. We'll meet them on site, and the reason that we do that is to get a feel for the environment, the culture, the team, the personalities. So then we can then share that with you, with candidates that are looking to go and work for them, because you need to know what it's like. You need to know, does it fit your personality? Does it fit with what you want? So make sure you ask that question, because there might be something in there that you think, that's not for me, and that's okay. That's absolutely fine. But I think if you don't know it and you start somewhere and then you think this really isn't for me, you'll kick yourself for not asking that question. What's the gender split? Sometimes that's an important thing, especially as women. I think I have always worked in a male-dominated industry, and I'm quite fortunate actually. In Birmingham, our gender split is near enough 50-50, and it's great to work in that. But it wasn't always like that. When I first started in my career, it was, I'd say, 80-20, and it's difficult sometimes, so I think it's important to understand that gender split and what you're going into. Not that it matters, you'll smash it anyway. You'll be amazing at your job, as women always are. But it's just important to know that and understand it, and maybe even understand, well, are there plans to kind of make that more equal, or what are their gender split goals, so that you've got a bit of an overview. Linking back to what I said again, if you can't find that information out about your 3 to 5 year plan for that organisation or strategic objectives, your recruiter should know it. If they're a good recruiter, they will understand everything about that client, and they will be able to tell you, actually, this is what they're working towards. Here's what their goals are. Here's what their plans are. Here's actually where some of the resource gaps are. They should know that and give you that information in your prep. So if they don't, ask them for it. And if they haven't got it, again, you can go off and do it yourself if you want to, but maybe ask them, oh, actually, could you try and find that out for me? Because if they've got a link to the customer, they might be able to get that in form of a document or something. And what's the benefit package? Maternity, holidays, well-being, all these different things. I think sometimes we as women shy away from asking some of those questions. And it's so important to know it. If you're going into a job, why would you not want to know some of these things? They're important for you. Why would you not want to know how many holidays do you get? What's the is there parental leave allowance? Is there a maternity package? Is there wellbeing days? Or what do you do for mental health? What do you do for diversity? I think these things are really important to ask, and I think they're important to know, because even if they're not 100% relevant to you right now, they might be in the future, or you might then become somebody that's a manager within that team or in that company, and you feel like actually that will then be important to your team around you or people that you might hire. So it's good to know what you're going into, and it's good to know the type of company and what they can offer as well. Don't shy away from asking that question, because you're ultimately going to work for them. If you're successful, you need to know these things before accepting a position. And finally, our last my last tips, practice makes perfect, but actually it doesn't. Practice makes progress. So I'll correct myself there, because it's progress, isn't it? The more you practice, the better you become at something. And no one's ever perfect. We're never the finished article. You can always learn more and teach yourself more, but the more you practice, the better you'll be at it. It's just kind of, that's how it works. Mock interviews build your confidence. So I talked about it earlier, about doing mock interviews with people. it helps you kind of see, if you were to do a mock interview and maybe you got stuck on a point, or you didn't quite answer that in the way that you wanted to, you can then reflect on it and go back, and that person can feed back to you and say, right, actually, do you know what, let's try it this way, or why don't you try talking about X, Y, and Z, or let's stop a second, tell me about that example, just give me your overview and let's also put it into words. So that's what it will help you do, is build your confidence around that. Your mock interviewer will help you identify your strengths as well, which again is really important. If you can identify your strengths, you can play to your strengths in an interview as well, and really make sure that you're selling yourself in the right way. Constructive feedback will help you identify areas that need working on. So like we just talked about then, an interviewer might do that with you and be like, right, okay, let's go through X, Y, and Z. Maybe you can try it this way, or let's look at your style of answering that question. And that feedback can then help you for your actual interview, and it can help you then, smash it basically and get that job ultimately. I'd love to put a question out, I guess, to the group. So would you benefit from having a mock interview with one of our recruitment consultants from SThree? I'll just give it a couple of seconds for people to respond. If you would, what we'll do, so Elizabeth Lamb on the call will put something in the chat where actually it will have an inbox where you can email. And if you were to put in there, obviously, what you were, maybe the type of skill set you have, we would be able to match you with a person from our company that could be suitable to do that interview with you. We would love to support and help as many people as possible. And if it means that you can feel more confident in being able to do an interview, then, that's incredible, because that's the ultimate goal of this. Finally, I'll move on to any questions from anybody.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions. Yeah, I hope that my voice will sound better right now. Yeah, let me read some of them. I think the most important will be, yeah, let me check where is this one. Well, actually, let's start with this one. Anxiety got the best of me and I completely messed up the coding exercise during my last interview. Didn't write a single line of correct code. How do I find the confidence for my next interview after this big, horrible mess? What would you suggest, Tara?
Okay. Well, look, first of all, these things happen. Sometimes, that mistakes like this happen. Do not let one interview that went wrong kind of make you feel like you can't do it again. You must be skilled enough to have got that interview in the first place. And a lot of being able to do another interview is believing in yourself and thinking, actually, do you know what? I can do this because I'm skilled enough to do it. But also think back to that interview and rewrite that code and think, can you do it? Were you able to, in maybe a calmer environment that wasn't that interview, were you able to write that code? And if you were, that should prove to yourself that you can do it and do it again. You just need to take a breath and think, right, okay. And then when you go to do that again in the next interview, you can remind yourself of when you did it in the calmer environment, because you've actually achieved it and accomplished it. That's kind of what I would say for that. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you so much. Let me ask this one. I think it's important. How do you frame being laid off, fired, or let go positively when answering why you left your last position, especially right now in the time of big layoffs?
Yeah, and look, that's a difficult one, isn't it? I guess if we look at the current position that everyone's in at the moment, there's a lot of layoffs happening, especially across the tech sector. And you've got to remember that the interview, if you're interviewing within the tech sector now, everybody's aware of what's happening. So actually, you could quite positively say, do you know, I was with a company for X amount of time. I achieved X, Y, and Z for them. However, at this moment in time, they were making a number of layoffs. And unfortunately, my department or team or I was one of those. I've got excellent references to back up what I've done. So if you do have a good character reference, or sometimes obviously companies will only provide date references, I would always try and get a character reference from your previous employer to say kind of, or your line manager to kind of just say actually a few nice bits about your technical ability and yourself, and say that, you know, I've got a character reference that will actually back up what I can do. If you're fired, I think that's obviously a difficult one. You know, I would never probably lead with that in an interview. But again, thinking about what I said at the beginning of this, you know, my core values, honesty and transparency. You could say, actually, at this company, things didn't work out for me. Their expectations were X, Y, and Z. I wasn't able to fulfill that. However, what I've since gone and done is upskilled myself in the areas that they believed that I couldn't deliver to. And I've really worked hard to develop myself in this space to ensure that actually, if this was to come up in another role, that I would be able to do it. That's probably how I would kind of approach that, being fired or laid off.
Thank you so much. And there was at least 2 questions that's mentioned. So actually, what would you suggest for post-grad of boot camps right now, as they don't have any experience to compete for the job, as there are a lot of people who has a lot of experience, but they were fired and laid off? What's the advice for those who recently just finished boot camp?
Yeah, and that's really hard, isn't it? You know, trying to get your foot in this industry, or just even get your foot on the ladder, is so difficult. So I really do empathize with you, because it's difficult. However, it's going to sound it's well, no, it's not going to sound silly. You need to believe in your ability. Like, if you finish this bootcamp, you finished you know, whatever it is you're doing, and you know that you're good, why should you not sell yourself equally as hard as someone that's got that technical ability? Companies these days, as well as wanting the experience, of course they want people who are experienced, but they also want people who are just kind of fresh and just learning, because that's where they get innovative ideas from. That's where they learn. You know, one of my values is around growth. Companies want to grow, and the way they do that is with people that are experienced, a balance of people that are experienced and people who aren't. You just need to really sell yourself. And I know it's difficult to do if you haven't got the experience to draw on, but you've got life experiences that you can draw on, or you've got experiences that you can draw on in whilst you're kind of working on your development, and you can share what you've done and how much time and effort you've put into you and your development and learning a particular tech or skill, and how you'll apply that to their company. That's the only way you can compete with people that are experienced, is really selling your capability and what you're able to do. But I don't think you can do that unless you 100% believe in yourself. You need to really kind of really be an advocate for yourself and your skills and what you can do and what you can give them. That's how I would say you could compete. Also, there might be additional things, you know, and I'm not saying this is always the route that everyone wants to go down, but there might be things that you could do, like you can go to some companies and say, actually, do you know what, let me trial me on something, you know, give me something, a project or a very small piece of work, see what I can do a work sample. So we do work samples at SThree, where you might spend half the day doing the job that we do to see, is it right for you and are you right for us? Ask that person, you know, say, if you're worried about my ability because I haven't got the experience, try me out for an afternoon, give me something to do, and let me show you what I can do that would help you and add value to your company.
I think it's a very good answer. And Yeah, thank you so much. You inspired us a lot today, and it's very good tips. And I think now we are ready to try if we didn't try it in 3 or 4 a while, for example. And yeah, it's very, very inspiring again. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much for sharing all these tips, all this experience. It was amazing.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it. If anybody has any other questions that maybe weren't answered, please do send them to the community inbox that I think Elizabeth Lamb will be sharing. Send them and I'll try and come back to you as soon as I can. I hope that your interviews moving forward are super successful. And most importantly, I hope you all really believe in your ability to do it. It's really important to believe in yourself, and I think that you can reach the goals that you're kind of working towards. So I wish you all the best of luck.